everyone, and here a warm welcome to our Reeperbahn Festival New York edition. My name is AC Coppens from the Catalyst agency, and I'm here live on the balcony of the Hecken, overseeing the legendary Reeperbahn here in Hamburg, together with a no less legendary Axel Schulz, founder and CEO of the Reeperbahn Festival. Hi, Alex.
Hi, good evening.
1.50 m, exactly. I'm happy to be back there. I was here in September to moderate Matt Dillon, actually. I'm only interviewing the cool people here in Hamburg. So cool to be here and in New York City at the same time. Tech makes it possible. Alex, what is the connection between New York and the Reeperbahn Festival?
Well, New York City was the first destination ever. We decided to offer a program for European music business people in cooperation with the American Association of Independent Music back in 2016.
Oh, wow, okay, that's cool. So what about the Reeperbahn Festival itself, scheduled to take place in September this year?
Yeah. Well, the big news is that we are working on a concept which allows us to see a real Reeperbahn Festival on the ground.
Great.
Of course, with additional modules and programs which are going to take place virtual, but in basic, it's a real edition of Reeperbahn Festival, a little bit downsized due to the COVID-19, but it's going to happen.
So it's going to be hybrids. That's great. Now, in light of the current travel restrictions that we have, we know that the Reeperbahn Festival will focus on European countries this year. But as the US is one of the biggest markets in the music industry, is there a plan to make sure the festival reaches out to the buyers in the States?
Yeah. I mean, if you make decision not to attend, which is always possible, there's a lot of modules and virtual options in order to get into contact with music business people from Europe, as you just mentioned, which we expect mostly this year. And we have, some of you might remember the option with the German chamber offered in New York, Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to do a virtual edition of this delegation this year.
That's wonderful. It looks like a staircase. We start here with our, sort of hybrid. We're here in real life, right? But then we will move on, also opening it up. I will see you, I guess, end of August I will see you in Nashville, Beijing, and Berlin.
At the same time.
At the same time.
And let me add one thing. Everybody would have expected that we would that Tony Visconti would have introduced the judges on our anchor contest in New York tomorrow. It's not going to happen, but it's going to happen in Berlin, New York, and Nashville at the same time by the end of August again.
Exactly. Well, to be very short, Fatsit, we are everywhere. So let's go and see you in a sec.
See you.
Hello and welcome back to the studios this time of the Reeperbahn Festival New York edition. And I'm here this time with my colleague Patrick Daniel of the Reeperbahn Festival. Patrick.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi. My name is Patrick Daniel. I work for the Reeperbahn Festival as the International Delegation Coordinator, co-programmed the New York edition this year and curated this panel. And yeah, we are very happy this year in this virtual edition to still were able to bring over a delegation of 29 music executives from Europe, label heads, distributors, publishers, marketing experts, as well as promotion companies. You name it, you will find them later on in our reception following this panel. So stay tuned and see you later.
Wonderful. So I would say, let's start with the panel, right? So for the panel, we have a great title. It is Global Music Streaming in Times of Crisis, Resilience, Risk, or Hope. And I'm super happy to have fantastic three experts to discuss this quite tricky question, we will see. And let me introduce you first to Jorge Brea. He is the CEO and founder of Symphonic in the USA. He started very small with no funding, no VC. He's now heading a company with 50 people in Tampa, Brooklyn, Denver, Nashville, and Bogota. And it is quite a digital music services company. Hi, Jorge.
Hello.
We have Marit with us, Marit Posch. She's the general manager of Idol. Idol, which is an independent digital distribution company. Sorry, guys. She's also the artist manager of Catnap. If you see Netflix and Unorthodox, you know who that is. And the third panelist today will be Glenn Peoples. He's the lead analyst of Billboard. The Vita is quite easy. Words, numbers, music. That's it. So if I have a question about the numbers, it will be the question to Glenn. And I would say let's start right away. But before we go into the crisis, let's go and watch BC, before the coronavirus, before the crisis. And tell me, was it actually, do we start with the hope part of the question? Were the perspectives not great, actually? Glenn, help me with the fingers. How was it? What did they say?
Well, before the crisis, BC, the U.S. market was doing really well. I think continuing the trends it had been doing over the last few years. Total consumption, if you include audio on demand, was up about 14%. I think vinyl up 42%. CD sales were down about 10%, which for CDs is fantastic. So much better from 20% declines we've seen in previous years. I think the music services are doing great. People have really warmed to the idea of renting, accessing music, having virtual music collections. That's just normal behavior. And I think that has let the trend continue upward. I think the US market overall would probably, if there were not a pandemic, that's a big if. If we can talk about that scenario, it would probably be up double digits again this year, maybe another 10% gain.
Right. We will talk about the if probably at the end again. If that this didn't happen, what would have then happened? Maybe, because we know how it is. But going to Jorge now, I read your interview for the A3C conference last fall, and you were saying that in the next 2 or 3 years, the industry or the streaming will continue to grow and should actually be 50% larger than it is in 19. Do you stick to this, Jorge? I mean, was it really like this before?
So very much BC, we were noticing those trends. Every year we've seen 25 to 50% growth in the company across our genres. BC, when that happened, it's been a bit of a different sort of scenario. I do still believe that there's going to be long-term growth. It'll just be interesting to see how further crises potentially affect some of that. But I feel still optimistic over the future. This was just something that was unprecedented on so many levels that it even affected our business, which, many thought that it would be, not affected at all because of being able to stay home and so forth.
Exactly. We're going to dig into this in a second. I just wanted to hear Marit. And Marit, can you tell me what was the prognostics for you, BC? Were you also in the hope, surfing the hope wave?
Yes, exactly. Like it was the same for Idol. The numbers for streaming and especially went up. So it was an increase that didn't really stop during the crisis. I know we will go to it later on, but yeah, I can totally agree to what Jorge and Glenn said.
Okay. And then it happens. The music streaming in the COVID-19 context. Is it an anomaly? Is it just a change, an optical illusion? I would like to get into this now, and maybe starting again with Glenn, and ask, Glenn, what happened? We see that in March, figures are dropping, but then it starts again in April. I mean, what happened? What are the figures saying?
You know, audio streaming took a dip in the first, I would say 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks, especially the first 2 weeks. AC, do we say this after COVID or during COVID? And we could speculate on why that is. People were home and probably not going much of anywhere, depending on where you worked. They were probably binge watching on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. It looks like they had moved to video more than audio. In fact, video, music video streams were up compared to what they had been doing before COVID. And it took a few weeks for audio to recover. But those first few weeks, I think, were strange. It was strange in every regard of the economy and strange for people and families, and disruption all over the place, and audio streams were no different.
Yeah, totally. I mean, public transport, gym closed, everything closed, and then suddenly we think like, yeah, it's going to get up at home. But actually music, sometimes that's, even if it is a community feeling and we share music when we dance, but sometimes you listen to music for yourself and you don't have the same taste than your family all the time, right? So it is less a common experience like, oh, let's watch something on Netflix tonight, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, Jorge, how is it? How did you see this now? Also, was it an anomaly? It was only just 2 weeks, and we are really like slowing, getting back to normal already, or how did you see this?
Yeah, so for us, our D-Day, so to speak, of COVID, excuse me, was on March 16th. That's when we really noticed a big dip, and some continuous dips occurring after that. Primarily because our catalog consists of a lot of Latin oriented content and electronic oriented content. We noticed that with Italy, Spain being heavily affected, and an understandable, scary panic in those regions, it affected those two genres primarily. Latin music is very consumed in Spain, particularly, some of the music from the Caribbean islands and so forth. So we noticed that in particular in Italy, in Spain in particular. And what we've started to see after that is that we've started to see normalcy again in terms of streaming consumption, but also even with other crises or other unrest, particularly like the United States is going through right now, other genres begin to be on the rise that are most closely related to kind of what happens. So it's the first time I think I've seen in a long while where such a impact, either from a country perspective or worldwide perspective, really affects how our business is ran. And that's enabled us not only to have to be creative about how we work with our clients, but also as business owners to be more cautious about future investments that we make because of these sort of dips. So it's, I think, going to create a lot more conservative sorts of investments. And I've spoken to many other, friends, colleagues, competitors as well. They've noticed similar trends where there were dips, but that they're starting to see, some pretty good gains now, and numbers that look more closer to January and February, so to speak, which is good.
Marit, which DC during crisis strategies for artists from a label or digital distribution perspective do you actually see? What happened during the shutdown? What did the artists do? You manage also artists, so what happened then?
They panicked, to be honest. I mean, it was like a shock for everyone to like be locked in, but for artists to play live, it was really devastating because basically most of their income just got shut off, and it's disastrous for a lot of artists, especially not even knowing now when they can play live again and have an income. So I mean, in Germany, luckily there's government support, so the artists can apply for fundings. But I think in other countries it's really bad. So, and the artists I talk to, they try to use the time for being in the studio, producing new music, trying to go live on Instagram or Facebook or Twitch and do a live stream and keep engaged with the fans. Because if you don't play, like basically at least half of your content on the socials will fall under the table as well.
Right.
The artists I work with, I encourage them to write songs, not just for themselves, but for other artists as well. And yeah, and I think same for distribution, they, like Idol, encourage the artists to take care of their socials, because it's a good time to check, all your channels and optimize them, and, engage more with your fans, like really use the time you have now.
But what about delaying the release dates? Is it actually better maybe to avoid putting out the music? Or what did you recommend them in this crisis time?
I mean, definitely for physical, because the stores were closed. So I
Sure.
worked on an album project for Infine, who's also distributed by Idol, and we decided that we should keep the digital release date, but push the physical one a bit to later on, because if the stores are closed and you can only do online sales, then it's not the real thing.
Yeah.
But I think for digital, I didn't really tell anyone to not release, because people were home and listening to music and taking the time to dig for new music. So I think it was a good time for music and releases.
Okay. In the description of this little panel, we had also the question, after all, music is streamed everywhere. And I would like to look at this aspect like everywhere. If you have a look at a couple of statistics, you will see that you have a huge number of streaming, for example, in Mexico, like 10 times more than, well, I'm not sure about the figure, Glenn, you will have to correct me, but like 4 times more than, I don't know, Paris, for example, or London. I mean, like it's huge different numbers there. And I was wondering, is there something which happened with the crisis or with the lockdowns, like that was music consumed differently depending on the territories, or were there new paths to viralize music, so to speak? Can we say that some artists in the UK and in the US, well, stayed at home because they were fairly well known there, but then some discovery happened somewhere else and they went viral differently? What about the geography of this? Jorge, you want to start with this? You are in two territories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that in certain territories, what you end up seeing is that you don't necessarily need a paid subscription in order to consume. That's why, YouTube's always been very popular in terms of Latin, whether it's South America or even the Caribbean islands and so forth. One thing that we did notice, even from a territory perspective in the US, is that TikTok itself became, a huge phenomenon from a streaming perspective, and that directly affected some of the consumption on YouTube as well as on the streaming side. We've seen a few artists that weren't performing as well on the streaming side, but because they had songs that were kind of produced specifically for the TikTok audience, really took off. And then the same thing, a lot of artists sort of altered their kind of production and style to kind of take advantage of the moment. And I mean that in a good way. And I think in general, one of the things that we also saw that sort of helped even just overall kind of streaming consumption in territories is that we saw more content and more volume being produced out of those territories. So you kind of see, at least from what we saw, was less kind of like band oriented music, indie rock, etc. But we saw a rise in more hip hop being produced, more Latin being produced, and more electronic being produced, because you don't need to travel much to be able to do things that in those genres. I think that really is helping a lot of these territories come back faster. Also helping to create some more viral success and ultimately affect consumption on the positive.
On a more practical level, you can actually check the statistics, what is played where exactly to influence your strategy. And I would like to ask Marit this time, how did you notice for your artists, for example, you know, like what happened? Could you see where the music was going, maybe in unexpected places and maybe influencing your strategy?
I mean, I can't really say because right in the middle of the Corona outbreak and lockdown, Catnap was featured in the unorthodox Netflix show. So the streams went up through the ceiling, and especially in the countries where the show was really popular. So in Israel, in New York, in the US in general, and also in South America because it's based. She comes from Argentina and Germany as well because it was produced here. Um, I, I didn't really see any territory change during lockdown. Not really. I mean, what I saw from the distribution perspective, from idols numbers, is a shift in genres. So, like the more soothing genres like ambient, children's music, actually classical music, that got an increase, and more like club music, upbeat stuff went down a bit. So this is something we could really see, for instance.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's go to this kind of music we have. So, hip hop down, pop down, R&B down, Latin down. Widening for classical, ambient, obviously kids, right? Families are at home. Country on Spotify was demonstrating the greatest resiliency. Crazy, right? So why? Glenn, maybe do you have an idea on this? Like what's happening with the genres or?
Yeah. You know, the talk around the office and talking to MRC Data, you know, formerly Nielsen Music, they've seen country increase every period they've surveyed during COVID, and it is increased consistently. So one thought I heard from an executive is country music is family friendly. And at least it's not very explicit. You don't have to worry about your kids hearing bad words. So while you're at home, you can play more country. The other thinking is that country music fans are laggards. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're slow to adopt digital downloads, relatively speaking, and they're slow to adopt subscription services. And now, perhaps listening more at home, listening more on smart speakers. I don't know about country on gaming devices, but I know that that's been seen some increases. People are getting more into streaming, and they're in their cars less, and they're probably listening to less country music on the radio. And radio is huge for country music, so I think they've switched their listening just to a different medium.
Marit, how is it? I mean, for electronic music, for the what could be good strategies for indies there if they are in electronic music? Shall they do now ambient version or piano version of the electronic beat, something so that it's really like going on, or is it already passé because we are nearly post, or we are already like, well, you know, struggling with the virus, but doing the best we can, living with it around waves. But will you recommend genres or certain version of music to adapt to these two?
I mean, generally, I don't really tell artists what to do because I strongly believe that an artist does what he needs to do. So if an artist is into like upbeat hip hop rap, he won't do ambient, no matter what you tell them, you know. So I mean, personally, for me, I come from a techno background, so I couldn't listen to upbeat electronic music because I got so sad that I couldn't go out dancing in the club. So I stopped completely. But I think a lot of people actually listen still to electronic music, maybe not as much, but they did. And I mean, I saw people on the balcony having like a private rave with themselves. And in Berlin now you can go outside and gather with friends in the parks, and there's definitely a lot of electronic music playing. So I think it might also be a territorial thing. that, you know, in some parts electronic music stays as strong as it was before, and in some it just goes down.
Cool. So, at any case, we saw first sales down, but listener numbers are stable. And can we expect growth due to this acceleration of digital consumption at home? Because, of course, we have to stress that streaming revenues isn't diminished when transactions decline for a little while, right? But we have also, obviously, to keep the consumer continuing to pay for this subscription, right? So what do you think the impact is going to be after the crisis? Let's start maybe with Jorge this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do see things continuing for the better. I can understand that certain individuals or territories may have to make financial sacrifices and, you know, switch to different services. What I would see that rather than just music consumption dropping off, potentially individuals going more for bundled options or options that are more economical. So other services would potentially do better. I mean, what you may see is certain territories that have platforms probably grow because the subscription rates are different in those territories than they are in other major ones. So I would say that consumption should continue to grow. Territories and platforms within those territories that are from them should possibly see a rise. And just in general in music, you know, I just wanted to say that we also saw a lot of the different same trends of children's music, relaxation music. And one thing we did notice is that there was more interest from artists and individuals that were doing music in electronic or hip hop in terms of exploring side projects or looking now at different forms of music differently than they were before. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more content being created, potentially in aliases or from big established producers and artists, just looking to sort of diversify their catalog and build on what they've already started.
Right, that was a great time for discovery, so to speak,
Yeah.
also. So,
Totally.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so Glenn, do you see there was a disruption or there was no disruption? What do you think?
Well, I think it's too early to say if there's a disruption in subscriptions and if people are going to continue to pay. I think they are. MRC data survey shows that nearly all people expect to keep their subscriptions that they have got recently. And given, you know, a normal churn rate, I think what MRC data has found is very good. So people expect to keep their subscriptions. They might pay less. Overall, new subscribers might get discounts. There's always student pricing. There's family plans. There might be bundles, like Jorge said. So
Right.
people might be a little more price sensitive. You know, I think we need to see how it plays out. They might keep, or they probably will keep, one music subscription. And there are so many video subscriptions to choose from. Maybe they decide which one they want to get rid of and save $10 or $20 a month. But because people stick with one subscription service, I think that bodes well for budgeting later in the year. The economy is probably going to be terrible. Unemployment is probably going to be high. I think we have not seen the worst of it, and people are going to have less discretionary income. But I think they'll stick with streaming. I think they'll stick with subscriptions, and the people who don't have ad-supported options, and I think YouTube and ad-supported Spotify will do very well.
Marit, do you think that people will maybe stick to one or two kind of services to stream? Like, do you think this will be the maximum they will subscribe to?
I think so. I mean, I agree with Glenn. I don't think that people will cut off the subscriptions, even if they have less income, because I think, yeah, this is something really important for people to like listen to music wherever they are. I think though that downloads will definitely go down more, and that people, like real fans especially, will rather pay directly to the artist via Bandcamp, for instance, because in the artist scene there were a lot of like calls for please buy my music at Bandcamp because then I will get the most revenues. So I think this this will happen more often, I guess, because also the artists need more income directly. But for streaming, I think, I mean, from what I experienced personally, from friends and myself, you stick to one subscription for music and maybe one or two for video, but that's it. Like, I think you picked your one service and you stick to it.
Do you think, I mean, we are saying that the DSPs are getting 40,000 plus tracks per week. So the big question is now to get, let's put the crisis behind us. There is still a lot of music. There is music which has been blocked on the way. It's going to come like crazy back. Like, okay, we need that even more out to be in phase, maybe to new live stuff or, you know, new albums which have been delayed, obviously, also for physical reasons, so to speak. So I would like to know, how do you break through the noise here? And Marita, I stick to you right now. Do you think there are too many releases already? And how can we create something new and to get out of the noise? What would be your take on that?
I mean, from a label perspective, I've seen so many labels putting out way too much because, first of all, as you said, there is not enough attention out there. So you always have to fight for it. And to really build a release and to really have an impact, you need time. Like, you need time and you need the energy and the motivation. And if it's just, one after the other, it's just like a constant flow, and you don't really work the release. You just release it without really any support. And I don't think that's good for neither the artist nor the label. So I would always recommend to not release too much and only really like significant things.
So more
And
single releases, for example?
I mean, this is definitely shifting the formats. Like a lot of artists don't really care about albums anymore. They rather want to have like a constant release schedule. Let's say, one track every other month or like one EP every third year. Whereas before it was like you have to release one album a year or at least 1.5 years. And that definitely changed, I think. Because I think it's a fragile balance because on the one hand, you have to stay on top and active and be relevant and be seen outside, but then you
Visible.
also, yes, visible, and you also have to keep the quality. Like, how many really good tracks can you really write? Not that many, I guess, unless you're like a super genius like Stevie Wonder. But I think there's definitely too much medium quality music out there, I would say. So I would hope that artists maybe focus on better quality and find a good way to have both.
Absolutely. I will get back to that one, to the visibility. But first, I want to hear George again, or Jorge. I'm so sorry. My Spanish accent is not that great. But anyway, from an indie perspective, what could be a good rebound strategy for indie players if you have a look at the ecosystem right now, knowing that there is a lot coming up? What would be your recommendation to artists, to labels, to your partners, so to speak, also?
So I love a lot of what Marie said because that's a lot of what how we think about it. I do believe there's a lot of content being released right now. I'm a fan of albums. However, from a business perspective, you end up putting 3, 4, or 5 months, let's say, on marketing of an album, and then the world is now in such a short attention span that a month later, unless there's hits in that album, it's kind of forgotten. So, what I think will happen is the quality of music should hopefully get better if we start to see that artists focus on releasing more consistently, but with time. So maybe a release every couple of months instead of, a release every 2 weeks, for example. I think that doing that will create a entire year's worth of marketing and possibilities, and the quality of music will be better because individuals will focus on trying to create the best possible song that they can. I do think that collaboration will become much more of a thing. I've seen already some artists that are trying to break into particular territories or even artists that are creating content solely to be viral. So music that can be really widely used in TikTok over and over and over is kind of what I'm seeing, which that doesn't necessarily mean that the quality is good, but because there's a lot of music on TikTok that is okay. But I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of attention on trying to create content just for the ability of getting noticed. So there's going to be various different sort of, instead of genres, types of artists and types of labels that want to either release quality and focus on that, or those that just want to try to get a ticket to success from a revenue perspective, et cetera. So it's going to be an interesting thing. But I would recommend for artists to take your time, craft your story, be consistent across your branding, set a release schedule, because DSPs, digital service providers, also want to know and see that. They don't want to necessarily just put in effort and energy and giving real estate, so to speak, for one project of one artist that they may never hear from again. So it's important to craft a story and be consistent in terms of planning for the future.
Absolutely. I remember reading in the blog of Glenn, actually, that this is what the DSP wants to have. They want to have your marketing plan. I can tell you, because I'm a marketing person, definitely, I was delighted to read this, right? Like, it's really back to the basics, right? It's know your audience, right? And it is obviously also, and I mean, I think we have all these new tools coming up that have been actually put on the market to allow the artists and the labels to see their performance. It's a lot of rich metrics now, right? I mean, Spotify launched a new notification and also new figures analysis since May 15. Correct me, Glenn. Do you know about this service of Spotify for metrics, for numbers?
The other people, Jorge and Mark, could speak to that better than I could. I'm
Yeah,
familiar with it.
definitely.
Okay.
Spotify and many of the other providers have started to be very transparent about their data to artists, which I think is great. I mean, for me and as a business owner and for distributors, for a long time, we've been tasked with sort of building technology to be able to try to provide that transparency to artists and record labels. And that's a very, very challenging thing and very costly. So I welcome the fact that there's now, tools that are easily available for an artist to kind of, get data from us, but also get data directly from the providers that are giving it. That, and I think platforms like Chartmetric, which are
Right.
fantastic, Next Big
Yeah.
Sound, they're starting to be very heavily used. And I think what's kind of cool in general is that people are now thinking in three ways, your brand, your music, and then your data, and how you can learn from that data to actually make the other two be successful.
But it's not only your data in terms of the metrics on the platforms where you are actually streaming. It goes beyond that. I mean, I'm coming back to what Marit was saying before about the visibility part, because it is about the audibility, right, on the stream, but it's also the visibility, and it goes far beyond the streaming, right? So, I mean, what happens if an artist is not really active on social media, basically? Marit, I mean, you said they need to invest in their brand and build their brand, which is outside of the pure streaming zone, right?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that, for instance, for the Facebook algorithm, it's actually better to not post so much. So a good advice would maybe be the contrary, to tell an artist, stop posting on Facebook like 3 times a day, because it will basically destroy your whole channel. It doesn't make any sense. Stop. So it's not really about how often you post something, because this is, as I said, maybe contrary to what you want to achieve. It's about the content. So if you have relevant content, you will be seen and the algorithm will pick it up and people will share. So I would always recommend to rather put the time into creating relevant content than to just post a selfie, you on the balcony, you at the store, you doing whatever, because that's not relevant and it gets boring pretty quickly. but maybe put the effort into a really nice photo or like a really nice little teaser video or something like that.
Right. So I think we heard it's more about quality than quantity. It's about investing in your brand. There are artists, labels, managers, bookers also, but we're more here on the recorded music part. So yeah, so that's great. Jorge, you said also something about collaboration. I think we were not defining the crisis before being, well, is it Corona? Is it more than this crisis? We know what's happening today and the context. So in the current context, the collaboration is getting really important. So do you think that, what sort of signs do we have to show to make sure the artists are not alone, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's important, I think, first off, as an industry, that we do our best to support the artist community, with mental health efforts and just simple discussions and check-ins is one thing I wanted to just make sure that that was noted. I think collaboration in general is going to change, not even just from a genre perspective, but from purely a technical perspective. I even read today that Metallica is working on their new album using email and Zoom. I mean, it's going to become, much more of a home-based style production. So I think a lot of the recording studios that are in the world are going to become very exclusive to specific acts and individuals that have the ability to access those. But I think with the aspect of being able to collaborate through a computer and having these discussions, you're going to be able to see different genres sort of popping up in different territories and so forth working. And also going a little bit to kind of what Marit was saying, I wouldn't be surprised if, in the history of our music world, we've always seen territory restricted releases, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more platform specific releases. So you may see music that is only going to be on a few platforms that makes sense for that style of music, and or a few territories and platforms within those territories. So that will happen as artists begin to collaborate. You may have, somebody like Diplo collaborate with artists from Africa, and maybe it's going to be easier to promote that song within an African-based DSP than it would be, within Spotify from a global perspective, even though they've been very, open to, musicians and artists from Africa. So I think collaboration is going to create some new sounds and new styles, certainly new messages with all the crises and unrest that we see. And certainly it's going to get more technical and much more advanced tools to help people make great music.
And I don't want to steal what you said the last time in our discussion, but you said something wonderful, saying like also because of the lack of physical touring, it is the environment, the collaboration, the partners are getting even more important, so to speak, and it contributes to mental health of our artists. And I think this is really important. I think I was very touched that you were saying this, Jorge. So now
Yeah.
we've been exploring this, and already we are shifting to the last part. We are giving some perspective, not how it's evolving. I would like to make a last round of the key takeaways and your takes on the very next future coming up, like after the crisis. I don't want to see AC because I mean my AC is my name, so it's a little bit crazy to say AC, whatever. But now, are we back to the hopes as if COVID never happened? Are we back to normal, or will this crisis actually leave some traces, or will it leave the industry change somewhere? Are we connected better? Are we actually doing what we should have been doing before? Is it just a little bit like fast forward button? We just accelerated the thing, and now it's a little bit more digital, a little bit more connected, and etc. So again, here I would love to have a round with you and start with you, Glenn. What's your take on this? What happened? What is it?
I think the pandemic has been like a pressure cooker that has put 5 years of adoption of new technologies into 5 months. And so we have artists doing live streams out of necessity. And I think that some of that is going to spill over. And people have gotten used to paying, possibly, but at least viewing concerts online and connecting with artists that way. As far as subscriptions, I think that'll be fine. I think it's probably a net positive that artists are going to take new tools and connect in different ways with their fans. And I think the collaboration that Jorge mentioned, just imagine that what commerce would be like if you couldn't connect individual buyers and sellers around the world. And eBay and Amazon and other platforms allow you to connect with people that you would never touch before. And in production and collaboration that connects the right people at the right time. And if it's done virtually, the music could be better and the collaborations could be better. And so I think a lot of this is going to carry over. And what is the new normal? Who knows? We might know in 5 years what the new normal is, but it's not going to be the same, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So new tech, new tools, new connections, new startups probably coming up. Jorge, we will see new business models coming up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if so. I mean, and I think this is going to take time for BC to sort of return in terms of daily life. I think live shows obviously are going to be, quite difficult, and bookings will. But I also think that there's going to be more interesting content, and I wouldn't be surprised if, the Amazons or the Netflixes of the world start to do more content around artists, similar to how there are comedy specials, where now they're beginning to be more documentary style combined with stand-up. I think that you can see documentary with the music production process. I think there's going to be more masterclass style of, interactions between artists and their fans. And I wouldn't be very surprised if we start to see meet and greets be as virtual as possible. And sadly, I think, but also in a positive, conferences and festivals, first off, what you all are doing is fantastic, and being able to do this is great. I think now it's going to create a little bit more accessibility for those that are unable to travel, to be able to get this sort of great knowledge and interaction. But I certainly miss being down in Hamburg in person for sure. I look forward to doing that in hopefully in September if the situation
I hope so.
looks okay.
I hope so too. Marit, we had an acceleration of the digitalization. Do we have now more streaming? I mean, if we have a look at physical market, a digital market, like, are we there where we wanted to be in 5 years? If we have a look at the figures, looking in Germany, for example, digital revenues in Germany, 36% physical, 64% digital, 55% from streaming. What's your take on this? Are we accelerated?
I think, I mean, from my experience, from a label point of view, like it's so different. Like some artists have 50-50 for physical and digital. Some artists only have 10% of physical sales, but 9 digital. So it's, I mean, I know that there's a general percentage in tendency, but I think it's still like an artist thing, because fans are fans and we will also still want to buy physical products. I think it's more the trend that's already going on for a couple of years of like very high quality, limited editions, box sets, merch, of course. And for the live sector, I think things like virtual reality shows will pop up. And I mean, there are already people working on it, and there are more and more requests for like virtual festivals, even with shows. So I think this will stay even when there's the live market will be back on its feet, because it's a nice addition, as Jorge said. You can participate even if you don't have the resources to actually go there and pay the fee and the travel and everything. So I think that's one of the good things coming out of this crisis, hopefully. And also less travel for the businesses, which, good for the planet.
Absolutely. So there is hope. And let's see now which questions we have from the chat. Thank you so much to you, but we're still on. And we're going to see, what do they want to know, Patrick?
Yes, thanks so much for all your wonderful questions so far. Let's see how many of these we can actually answer. How do you think which parts of the industry will change forever after this crisis? It's a very open question, so open answers welcome.
I mean, personally, I think downloads will very much be affected. It was already kind of going in that direction, although I see downloads remaining and just being more exclusive and or for super fans. As Mary mentioned earlier, Bandcamp, I think, will be a great platform that will continue doing what they're doing for artists. But the only other one to me is obviously live shows, mostly because they're going to adapt to new technologies and venues will become more creative about monetizing their content instead of doing it in person. So that's what I would think. It's early to tell, of course.
Oh, that's too bad it's over, because I had already even more questions about geography, about a fair dispatch of the revenues, also to the artists, and maybe a fairer future. But I mean, we heard already more collaborative future, more tech coming up. Tech has problems sometimes, but we have a great future ahead if we do this together, I would say, that's for sure. So be collaborative, and that's exactly what we are right now. So go to the chat, the link will be posted on Zoom, where we all meet together, and then we will mingle again in breakout rooms, and it will be a great event, nearly like in real life. So see you in a sec. I'm going to take my computer and go to Zoom right now,
Let's
right?
do that.
Because
Let's do that.
I hope I received the link, and then I will be able to join you all in one of the breakout rooms.
Thanks so much for
Thank
the
you to
panelists here, and see you all in
Yes.
the reception. Thanks so much, AC. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Jorge, Marit, and Glenn. See you
Thank you so
soon.
much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.